Hello, welcome to the intersection at Politics Social. I'm Rachel Harris. It's lovely to be here with you all this evening, and I am very happy to have Patrick. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I do. I'm Patrick McCann. Got me
Patrick
there
McCann.
before.
Wow. And how do you describe yourself? What do you do? Who are you?
So I'm Patrick McCann. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a cis, gay, middle-aged, middle class, socially mobile lad. I am a husband, and I'm a dog dad. And I would describe myself probably as queer first, but that's something I can describe myself as, and some others can, but not everyone. So there's a bit of
Cool.
an assumption if people start. I don't necessarily define myself as a queer. And certainly, if someone shouts that at me in the street, as they do occasionally, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not really up for that, I have to say. And
No.
then work-wise, I am a director of learning with Linklaters. We're a big multinational, well-known, sort of top of the game law firm, big corporate law firm. We've got about 5,000 people. We've got about 20, 30 offices, and we're around the globe. I'm currently at the Global Partners Conference in a hotel room in Amsterdam. So this isn't one of those mock backgrounds. This is the actual background that I'm in. It's very nice. Feel a bit out of place. There you go. And then I do a couple of other things. So I'm the co-senior sponsor of the firm's LGBT plus network, and I'm really pleased to say we have come in at #1 in the Stonewall Workplace Equality
Hey.
Index this year, which is great because that's up from 53 about 3 or 4 years ago. So that is a good thing, and I like to think that I've contributed to that in
Yeah.
a little way. And then I also am chair of the City of London Law Society training committee. That law society has got a possibly undeserved,
Yeah.
slightly stuffy reputation, maybe. Oh God, I hope they don't. And I just see one of my contributions as trying to modernise that a bit, including being who I am, but also
Yeah.
what I do. And then in that role, I've done three sort of major things. So I've set up a fund called SwissQuiff, and that pays for law centre workers to go through the solicitor's qualification process.
Hmm.
I've raised 1,083,000 for that, so that means 105 people will become solicitors who are working in areas like housing, debt, family, immigration,
Brilliant.
that sort of stuff. And then I've set up a thing called City Century, and that's over 50 city law firms, and we are going out and recruiting socially mobile, essentially school leavers, and getting them through to being a solicitor. So we now recruit about 150 between us each year. So that's cool, and we're finding kids who are brilliant but wouldn't have thought of law, don't even know about law. I sort of see them as quite often the best kids in the
Yeah.
most challenging schools. And then I also run a thing which Rachel knows about, which is a development program for queer lawyers called the LLP. So we ran the first one in July. We had 20 lawyers coming onto that from, sorry, 30 from 20 law firms, and we managed to raise £31,500 for LGBTQ plus charities, including Global Butterflies, which Rachel and Emma, sorry, I've married you off to someone else, runs so brilliantly. So that's
Would be
me.
the first time.
Yeah. I'm also recently diagnosed as neurodiverse with, it was either, I think it was ADHD or ADD. I wasn't really
Hmm.
mind or somewhere else, but
Yeah.
um, that has made me understand why I'm a bit hyperactive.
Oh, thank you for that great
Sorry,
background.
that's a long introduction. You won't
No,
get
no,
from me
it's
ever.
perfect. You've just short-circuited some questions later. That's perfect. So we're going to talk about LGBT activism in the past and in the present. And we're going to go right back to the sort of 1980s and Section 28. So could you sort of start off by talking a little bit about what Section 28 was and its effect and how it was that the LGBT community and their allies fought back? And then we'll go on to talk a little bit about HIV/AIDS, which was sort of in parallel of that at the same time.
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing to say is that at the time in the UK, the dominant government was the Conservative government, and it had a large majority, and it was led by a particularly strong individual, Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
And the climate that it created was one of dominance of what I would call privileged people, so white, middle class, cis, straight type people in professional jobs, and that was sort of its thing. It was about, in my view, suppressing the non-dominant voices, so the working class, people of color, anybody that would have been identified as queer, the working classes, etc., people who were in receipt of state benefits. And as part of that, one of its sort of linchpins was, I think, essentially to keep the family normal, to keep people heterosexual, and as part of that, it was seen that the education or the awareness raising of young people in schools around queerness, around LGBTQIA plus type people, was a bad thing. So it brought in a law called Section 28, which essentially banned the education, the promulgation of information around what they called pretend same-sex relationships. So that meant anybody that was not in a husband, wife, 2.2 children type thing, but particularly queer people. Came about because there was a book that was referenced, I think, in probably somewhere like the Daily Mail, which I think was called something like Eric Lives with Martin and Jenny, and Jerry. Is it Jenny? Anyway, it was about a girl. So it was Jenny Lives with Eric and Martin. There you go. Who lived with two gay dads, and this was felt to be massively offensive. I think someone said it might have been in a school library. So this sort of led to this whole culture of stopping people in schools finding out about non-heterosexual relationships, and it was deeply offensive. Of course, we have something very very similar being promulgated by the last government, and for us as LGBTQIA plus people, nearly all of whom would have had that experience of being queer at school and not really having access to information, support, guidance, security, it just felt really bad. And it also came at the time of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and so there were many people who were dying, were getting ill. At the time, there was no prevention, no cure, and so those people were wasting away and dying. So that was another reason why that was brought in by the government. So the reaction to that was loud, I would say. It didn't stop Section 28 come through, but what it did do is it galvanized the LGBTQIA plus community and also their allies to make some noise about this. I was at university at the time studying law, so a lot of what I was studying in things like jurisprudence and human rights and family law was around this particular piece of legislation. I just need to insert here. One of the things that's quite interesting about cis white, often middle class gay men is that up until the point that they self-acknowledge that they are gay and tell other people about it, they've quite often not had their human rights or their privilege restricted in any way. So say that happens to you at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. It comes as quite a shock and quite a surprise. And as a result, you become quite affronted and offended. And then you sort of, because this doesn't seem right, right? Because I've been told I'm always fine. So you've been conditioned to think that the world will give you everything. So when that's taken away from you, it's such a shock that you can then go into sort of anger and noise and action quite a lot. So it was, I would say, some of Section 28 was gay men being like really offended that someone passed something against it, whereas people of color, people from lower socio-economic backgrounds, and women were like, "Hey mate, it's just another thing," and were definitely with us, but this surprise that dominant members of society would punch down, it was not a surprise to them, it was to us. I think if there was a community that didn't have white gay men in it, I think it would be very different. I think we'd all just, if we'd all just keep going around our lives and not get activated. So the good thing about it is that both HIV and AIDS and Section 28 really galvanized a whole bunch of people. So what we were doing was we were in the streets, we were in the news, literally in the news. So there were 3 or 4 lesbians who came in and hijacked the 6 o'clock news. I think Sue Lawley, one of the famous newsreaders, was reading at the time. I think our co-newsreader had to sit on one of the other lesbians to stop them, and they were, trying to make that noise and get this into the conversation. So it was a very interesting thing to see. A number of the sort of the more left wing and the musical influences of the time, the Bronski Beats of this world, the Jimmy Somervilles of this world were, you know, particularly politically activated about it. I think it's really interesting now
Mm.
to see back then how political popular culture was.
Yeah.
You see some of that now around the Middle East conflict. But it was really part of our, well, I usually say DN gay. It was really part of our community
Yeah.
and who we were.
Yeah. And I think sort of like you, I was at university in the 80s. Um, and I, wasn't out. I didn't really know a lot about Section 28, but I remember in parallel with the Daily Mail articles, all the front pages, repeated demonization of the gay community. But also HIV/AIDS was starting to, the 80s. I remember it, a few cases, then a lot more cases, and then a lot of people that I knew were getting affected. Um, and that being demonized and these terrible leaflets coming out, with John Hurt's voice going, "It's an iceberg and we're all going to die." And it was just a really frightening time on the community. How were you feel? What was your feelings about that time when all that? Because anybody didn't know much, but the government was sending out pamphlets and things, which were really dark and they felt quite demonizing as well.
Yeah, and in a way, looking back, um, I have slightly less of a problem with the demonization or the darkness of the thing because we didn't know, right? So
Yeah,
I see it sort of reflected a bit in terms of COVID and no
yeah,
one moves, etc., etc. And if that was the only reason they were writing in that way, I would be okay with it. But it wasn't
mm,
about that. It
mm,
was about demonizing this otherness thing.
yeah.
So I think a few things to say here. I think the first thing to say is I'm 56 now. I was born in 68. Had I been born in
Oh, you're
63?
so young.
Oh, had I been born in I was at a thing full of young people last week and I said, "Oh, I'm 56." And one of them said, "Oh, you don't look it." And I was like, "Oh, you are going to go far in your career." Um, um, but so I was born 68, but if I'd been born 63 or 58, I would be dead now for sure.
Yeah.
The news started to come out in about 1981, coming out of America, particularly San Francisco at the time. AIDS was called gay-related immune deficiency.
Yeah.
Because it was felt to be uh, particularly sexually active uh,
Yeah.
uh, white gay men who were succumbing at the time. But I was lucky enough to sort of be coming out in the late 80s. And I was a reader, right? I educated myself. My dad got Time magazine delivered to our home, so I was able to read and things like that. So I was able to understand how I might reduce the chance of infection. But had
Mm,
I not had that information,
yeah.
I would have been doing all the things I'm sure that would have increased my chances of getting an infection. So I'm really lucky. But my journey went like this. I went up to uni at 17 in 85. I went to London University. I went there because I sort of wanted to be in the centre of things. I knew I was a gay man, but I wasn't out about being a gay man. And I'd known that since I was 5. And all of my education and all of society, the only gay men that you saw were they were, flamboyant, a bit like my good self. They were actors. They were dodgy priests. They were poets. They were painters. They were paedophiles. These were the sorts of they were objects of ridicule and things to be scared of and to stay away from. And then when this infection came along, it was then thought that they were carrying some sort of plague as well. So that didn't create the most positive of environments in which to come out. But what I saw, I joined the London Central YMCA to sort of get myself fit in the sort of the early 90s. And that was a hub,
Mm,
gay men. And there were a generation above me, 5 or 10 years above me, who I saw disappear.
mm,
I just it started with the pretty boys, right? The pretty boys, the waiters, the West End Wendy's, the actors, the people that were in the creative arts. They were the ones that you noticed going first. Maybe because we noticed them because they were pretty, and you're watching them, and then you see them. But also, I think there might have been a correlation between being pretty, being sexually, therefore able to be sexually active, and
mm,
their chances of acquiring a sexually primarily sexually transmitted disease was up. And so what I would see at the YMCA is these beautiful boys, just stunning. You could have put any of them in an Athena poster. Athena was a around 80s things, but you would see them get thinner. First thing you would see is see weight.
Yep.
Then you'd see a sort of a grayness to the skin. You'd see a sunkenness of the eyes.
Mm.
You'd see difficulties with mobility, and that would translate into walking sticks and Zimmer frames and wheelchairs and then coffins. And that was sort of the process. And so I saw this generation disappear. There's a really interesting photograph by the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. There are two photographs. One where it has the Gay Men's Chorus facing forward. There are like 300-400 of them. And then one where it has that choir, which is from, say, the 90s or whenever it is representing the choir as it was 20 years before. And all but a handful have turned their backs, and the people who have turned their backs represent the people that have died in that original choir. So I can't overstate how this decimated
Yeah.
a particular generation.
Yeah.
So coming out in that time was quite interesting. So I came into a culture that was hypersexualized, to some degree political, was about the body beautiful, was about presenting this, some trying to present this sort of masculine image, and it was all about sex and health and sort of making those connections with people. And so you come out and you think, hey, I found my tribe, and then you realize your tribe is dying, or at least the slightly more elders of the tribe are dying. So that is really, really difficult. And then what you add to that is that you're likely, to some degree, with some people closeted, and then if you find that you have HIV or AIDS, you're then probably closeted even further. So you weren't, the stigma, I can't begin to tell you, the stigma attached to being gay and the stigma attached to having HIV or AIDS. I mean, that literally meant, being evicted, losing your job, having people spit at you in the street, no one going anywhere near you, wards being closed to you, or you're cut off in a side room, and food is sort of pushed through, but no one will come near to you. Your family ostracize you. The church turn their back on you. It's really bad. And the juxtaposition of that with for me at least with COVID, we definitely had the thing with COVID, don't go near, but no one said those people are evil. They brought it on themselves. This is God extending her wrath or anything. So that's a lot to cope with. And the way it played out for me is that I became two or three things. I became essentially very conservative around sex, and I would say, bordering on frigid. It's really difficult to enjoy yourself if you're not sure if you're going to die a few months later. And it also got me very, very concerned to try and do something for people who were queer, and people who were living with HIV and AIDS. So I did some work around that, a tiny bit, but a bit that really drove me. So I don't know if that answers your question, but at the same time,
no, it does. It really helps get I remember, the HIV and AIDS and and losing friends, and then moving into the period where I had friends who had HIV. They had the diagnosis, they thought they were going to die, and then suddenly a sort of form of the cocktail came along, and they'd almost sold everything and were getting ready to say goodbye, and then suddenly they got better again. And they had a friend who had a bar and everything and had sold it and had to buy it back and get back on with. So coming through that, but you've got HIV/AIDS, you've got the newspapers and the media and politicians and Section 28 all going on. So coming out of that, how was Section 28 defeated? How did we come out of the light? Because we're going to talk about now with the same problems again. How did you defeat what was going on with Section 28?
Well, do you know what? I don't think we did, and we certainly didn't quickly, right? It took, what, 20, 30, 40, 30 years for Section 28 to be overturned by the last government.
Labour. Was it Labour to 92?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, no, Conservatives. 92, was it? I can't remember.
Yeah, let me think.
The Tories were until 97.
97.
Well,
Yeah.
97 was when Labour came in, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't know whether it was before or after then.
It
Uh,
was a long time
anyway,
anyway.
it was a
So
long time.
yeah,
Uh, I feel like it was longer. I feel like it was later than 97,
it
but
did feel a long time.
sorry if I've got that wrong.
It was about 2002 before they repealed Section 28.
There you
It
go.
was the
There you
second term of the Labour government when they did it.
So
Right.
I think a few things happened. I think around HIV and AIDS,
Mm.
uh, certainly, treatment and
Yeah.
and prevention appeared.
Mm.
I lost a lot of friends. I also worked for the Terence Higgins Trust, providing legal representation pro bono for a number of their clients. And believe me, that whole client base died.
Yeah.
And I had a boyfriend who we thought he had acne,
Mm.
and it wasn't. It was Kaposi sarcoma, and he went in, on a Friday to get his results, and he went from thinking he was healthy to having Kaposi sarcoma. The good news is he's still around and fine because he managed to get himself infected at the right time, just before AZT and various other concoctions
Yeah.
came in that prolonged his life. But I think what happened is there became a lot of goodwill around people with HIV and AIDS, including because it wasn't just white gay men who were
Yeah.
contracting. I think there was an understanding of those people. Some famous people, particularly Freddie Mercury, succumbed, and I think people could realize that it could touch people that they really loved and that they
Yeah.
knew. I will shout out now to Princess Diana at the time, who was like the first major celebrity to go in and hold hands with
Yeah.
people with HIV and AIDS and people in AIDS wards, and that just it changed the climate. It changed society into being something a bit more compassionate. And then I
Yeah.
think what happened is there's sort of a whole load of people came out. And it's really difficult, I think, to discriminate against people that you know and like. So if lots of people are coming out, you probably know someone. If you're lucky, you like them. So then it's difficult to discriminate. And then it made no sense
Yeah.
to have an anti-queer thing going around. And also it was based on the assumption that you could teach people to be queer. I mean, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
I would have aced that course. I would probably be lecturing on it at
Yeah.
some fabulous
Yeah.
university had that been available. But it's
Mm.
quite difficult to get people to change people's orientation.
Mm.
And so I think what was happening, and this has happened through time all the time, is that any dominant culture, in order to increase its dominance, will want to find something wrong with society, blame it on a particularly underrepresented group,
Yeah.
Jews, blacks, Irish, Kurds, left-handed people, people who are interested in witchcraft,
Mm.
whatever it might be, people of color,
Yeah.
Muslims. What have we got now? We've got Haitians over in America, and my sense of society gets a bit bored of that and says, no, we're not up for that. But it happens, and
Yeah.
at some point, someone gets thrown into the pot, and we all point to them. And we definitely see that around trans, and to a slightly lesser degree,
Yeah.
non-binary people. It
Yeah.
becomes a thing where you can go, where the dominant politics cannot look at the things that they're not fixing: health, economy, security, education standards, disease, whatever it might be, environment. And instead, what they'll do is focus our attention in a sort of a look over here thing at someone else. They'll say this is bad and these people are to blame. And we see
Mm.
that massively around trans people now.
Yeah.
And then the conversation is around that. And then if they're really clever, they'll say if you try and defend that particular underrepresented community, you are then attacking another underrepresented community. So if I say anything to someone about, I don't think that's right that we're saying that about trans people, I'm not sure that's true, I might get accused of other sorts of
Yeah.
bigotry when that happens. That's quite an interesting
Mm.
paradigm. And
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've seen it before. It happens every 10 years, and it's happening for trans people now. It will pass, and we will make it pass, and we will win, and rightness will triumph. But
Mm.
God, it's dull
Do
while
you,
you have to go through it.
and do you feel, I mean, the Section 28, it felt like, because as you said, more and more people were coming out, and we put a face on the gay community, and we were in other people's communities. And once you normalize that, the acceptance becomes there, and it's easier then for a government to roll that back. And it feels like now we're going that the similarities to how I remember the 1980s and Section 28 coming in. It feels, Kemi Bed not wanted to, in the education, they wanted to do a Section 28 in schools. I mean, the jury's out on that. And now are they going to do that? They're trying to take our healthcare away. They start with the kids, and now they're looking at the adult care. And it does feel like it does feel like history repeating itself. And it's the same newspapers writing, there were 10,000 articles about trans people in 2 years, and the hate crime doubled in a year, and it went up by 156%. And it just incredibly, it feels very familiar. But what feels different to me is the social media now. And so some of those things you say, oh, if you support trans women, you're demonizing, don't you value the safety of women, even though trans women and trans community have nothing to do with the safety of women because we are women. It's just the way that they've split it off. It just feels that social media and and I think I said to you that we have a lot of dark money flooding into the UK from some groups. We have right-wing politicians. We have a horrible press. Is it just an extrapolation of what happened back in the 80s, or do you think I mean, does it feel worse, or do you think it's the same, or how do you feel?
Yeah, and I have to be slightly careful criticizing any government.
Yeah. That's okay.
Uh, but if I can talk societally, so societal moods tend to change and the laws follow afterwards. There are some cases where that isn't the case, and laws will change for good or bad
Yeah.
and move things along. So I would say in this country, changing same-sex marriage, society sort of did that, but then when the law changed, it made it more. So we didn't have to wait as long as one might have thought. Still, I had to wait 16 years to marry my now husband, so that did feel quite a long time.
Mm.
But I think it's always worth looking quite deeply at why is this a conversation, and why is this getting to be a conversation, and
Yeah.
what is actually going on.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about this, and what are we not talking about while we're talking about that, and to whose benefit is that there? So without wanting to criticize any government, hypothetically speaking, you might see a government that had been in power for a while, and the power base is beginning to go, uh, and the electorate is becoming a little bit less, um, is enjoying that government a little bit less, and is becoming a little bit invested in their success. And you might then find that that's when typically a government will point at other people and say,
Yeah.
this is wrong and this is wrong. And
Othering.
we'll talk about that and not this.
Yeah.
And that's a way to try and retain power when your power is really under threat. And then the other way is to try and gain power by doing exactly the same. The world is really bad. Here's the problem. These people are causing the problem. I will sort it for you. And we see that as people are trying to acquire or reacquire power. And I think it's really worth looking at what's actually going on, reading around, not just in the media that might be owned by people are um, who are invested in
Yeah.
certain people acquiring or not keeping power.
Yeah.
Just work out what's going on. But the most important thing, I think, is to look at who the community is that's being pointed at and try and engage with those people, listen to what they are saying, and then ask them what help you can provide, and then do something to provide that help.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of trans and non-binary friends. I work with some. I've recruited them, and I've been delighted to have just promoted
Hey.
someone that fits in that category, who is amazing. And all I can say is what I see in the media about trans people is not what I see with the people I know and love, you and Emma particularly included. I just see gentle, lovely, ethical, caring, frightened, now more damaged, exhausted,
Yeah.
people that I really care about. And so you've got to try and say those people, because if they come for them, they
Yeah.
come for the next ones. And I
So,
mean, Rachel, you've written about this. This feels, if we allow the smallest group to go, then the next smallest group,
yeah.
which will be lesbians probably,
Yeah.
or bisexual people, then they'll come for the gay men, and then they'll come for women as
Yeah.
a whole. I think is
It's
sort
a
of
gateway drug, trans. It's a gateway hate drug, as I call it. It really is. It's a
yeah.
gateway drug.
You're not far wrong. You're not far
Yeah.
wrong.
And
But I think
mm,
what I'm really hopeful about is that society as a whole, and certainly those that think and those that research, their mood is very different. Their mood is around, we are going to make this world better. We are going to be kinder to people. We
Yeah.
are going to base our attitudes and our approaches on fact, not fabrication. And I am hopeful, at least my social media feed, there's some really nice stuff coming through as well.
Yeah.
But if you just let it happen, it will happen, as in the bad stuff will happen if you let it happen, I think. So you have to be vocal.
I mean, some of the cruelest comments I've had and attacks actually come from our own community. So LGBT people that have been forced by certain organizations we won't name to say the trans are eliminating lesbians, and I might have been gay, but are you know, if the trans community was around when you would have transed me out, and all that horrible stuff they say. And there are gay guys and lesbians and attacking trans people out here, and trying to break the T away. What would you say to them?
I'm perplexed, frustrated, sad, affronted, that that's the sort of stuff that's going. Here's my view. Is the queer community, by which I would include anyone who represents as not being a sort of a straight down the middle heterosexual cis type person. I include allies, by the way, in my queer community. The way I sort of see it is, I think that's about, we have in common the fact that we need to look after each other, protect each other, that we have similar-ish experiences as we go through, and that we might be on a journey and we might or might not have reached our destination, but it would be really nice to be supported to get there, and that we probably know ourselves better than others.
Yes.
And so if I say this is where I am on stuff, that we go, that's fine. I try not to tell other people what they are, and to not believe them when they say this is who fundamentally I am. Having said that, there are some hate groups who say they're nice people, and I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah.
So if someone says this is me, this is my experience, this is my perception, this is what's going on for me, I'm like, okay, I'm here for you, right? And I support that. And my understanding of the LGBTQ plus rights movement is that has been, that was very much, to at least some degree, led by, supported by, instigated by people of color, people from underrepresented communities, people who might have identified as trans or non-binary, and not just white middle class cis gay men. Lesbians too. I remember lesbians looking after us in the HIV/AIDS crisis. So I sort of think, why would you not want to support those people? And I don't. I'm just trying to think who the person is that could turn me into a trans woman. And I just want to know. I'm sort of like, it's all right, I can look after myself. Don't need anybody around me to stop this happening. Rachel, you might put something in the drink. You might make me read a book. Yeah, again. Let's not go back to the 1990s. But I'm just not convinced that you could do that for me.
No.
But what I would like to know is that if that was something that I might be considering, or just interested in, that I would be able to talk to someone like you, and you would go, this is what it is. I mean, you can be forceful, Rachel. I think you're amazing voice actor, but I don't see you persuading me down that path. So I sort of wonder if it's slightly patronizing to assume that people need to be protected from finding their own destination by not allowing them to do that. So power to your elbow, people believe what they believe, but when it starts hurting people, when it starts denying rights, when I see what it does to you, Rachel, how upset you rightly get, when I see what that does to your mental health and my mental health, when I see what it does to, Brianna Jay, when I see that, when I see my colleagues and I'm like, oh, hi, how are you? And I can just see that today is a bad day for them. That sort of accepts me. So I'm sort of about love and acceptance, taking people as who they are and trying to help them with that rather than the other stuff. I don't genuinely, I don't get it. But look, back in the day, You'll remember this, Rachel. It was it was separation by gay men from lesbians, and to some degree the other way around. But it was like, oh, don't mix, no, don't mix with them. And I'm like, oh God, no, mix with them. They have much more fun. They know much better cocktails, and they've got a good record collection. So
Yeah.
I'm in that sort of space, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I understand. No, thank you.
And you know some wicked, dirty, dirty jokes,
I
Rachel.
do.
I like being there for that with you.
Yeah, I do. But that was I worked in the defense industry a long time. Yeah, it is interesting. I wish that at the moment we've got a lot of celebrities, a lot of gay celebrities on television who never talk about trans because they know they're going to get the pylon. There are some who'll never speak about it. I generally think they don't care about trans people. There are those that do but don't. And often Graham knows that I often talk about streamers that won't mention it because they think they'll lose half their audience if they support trans community, which they won't because we know it's a small group of. And I wish it's those voices. There are some really great people in the sort of activism campaigning areas that I know who will campaign. I've often rude about James O'Brien, who I love, but he developed as I call on our streaming channel, the James O'Brien defense. He'll say, "Oh, I hate people who are anti-woke. Trans issues aside, anti-woke stuff is rubbish." Because he says trans issues aside, because he doesn't want to talk about those, because he doesn't want to alienate this what he perceives as a large audience. And I wish he would talk about it. And I often say to streamers, sit down with a trans person for half an hour, have a conversation. Then you're an expert. Then you can talk about it.
Yeah.
These issues are, this is the attack on trans people aren't, don't put women at risk. B, this is a gateway drug to trans adults, same-sex marriage, women's rights. Ultimately, it's women's rights that a lot of this money coming in is after, but they're going through the get trans, same-sex marriage, and gay people to get to you. It is there's lots of things that people need to understand that in 2016 we were not talking about trans people in this way. This was a created culture war for othering, dark money, anti-abortion stuff, women's rights, voting rights, and all the rise. And that you talk to a presenter about that, but a lot of people, they just don't want to learn that stuff. And I'm always offering it to a lot of people. I can sit down for an hour over a cup of coffee and talk you through this. They never take you up on it because they don't want to learn about that, because they just don't want to go online and speak about this stuff. And that it's the silence that's killing us. It's the reason I don't go out as much as it's the reason, because the activists even in the LGBT community are quiet, and because they just don't want to speak about it, because there is a wave on social media, but it's on social media, and I'm not on social media anymore, but it's that wave that they're worried about, and it is intimidating.
No.
Oh, great.
I just want to jump in, voice of God here. Just say thank you very much to Puninator for the £5 super chat and the sarcastic comment. Patrick, haven't you heard? You just need to go to school in America and you'll be transitioned. Just be careful of the pre-op meal. It's made by pets. He says made by pets. It might mean made of pets. I don't know. But thanks for the super chat, Puninator. That's very kind of you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I shall be sure to zip off to America and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that are running through my mind at the moment. I think number one is I find it quite sad that that's what they are having to think, and I understand it to some degree. Because the reality is that there will probably be something that will happen, and maybe you don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I just think, what are you about, right? So what are you about, and what's your purpose in being on this earth? And fine, if you've made the decision that my purpose on earth is to earn money, gain profile, have a fabulous social media thing, or maybe just for my own mental health, I don't want to get down that road. I understand that, and we can't all be on every a picket line. But I do think certainly to have a conversation with someone is useful. And look, I've seen it before, right? I've seen it. It's the whole thing about the familiarization of the attacked, right? If you get to know them, it becomes more difficult for you not to align with them and not to ally for them. So I reckon it's partly that some people might not actually care, but it's probably more like that, oh God, it's going to be a bit too much effort, because if I meet with Rachel, I'm probably going to be convinced, and then I'm going to have to do something. And I'm busy. I've got plans this evening. Don't know. But I mean, we definitely see it in the corporate sector. I'm really pleased to say that, with my firm, I think we are fairly good at this sort of stuff, and we do put some messages out there. Not We're a law firm. We're never going to be on every picket line for sure. But I've been interested in a couple of things. I've been interested in the conversations that I'm hearing between law firms and how the sort of the lower middle management, the people that are rising up, they are like, no, we are trans inclusive and we are trans allied. That's thing number one. Thing number two, on my course that I ran, 30 lawyers, 20 law firms, we were very pro-trans. We were very pro-non-binary. One of the person came out as being non-binary. One of the people there was trans, and we were very learning stuff, and we were very like, no, we're here.
Yeah.
We've metaphorically and literally got our arms around you. No one messes with you while we're around. So I was really pleased at that. And then I was really pleased when I went to the British LGBT Awards this year, that the biggest round of applause was for rightly for Bobby Pickard in Trans in the City, from Trans in the City. Gave a stonking speech, as she always does. There was a lot of love for that. There were a lot of trans and non-binary people who were nominated and won. There were a number of people that were nominated and won for their work around trans and non-binary people. And I know that what David Tennant said was controversial.
Not to me.
To some. But I think what he was actually saying is, can we stop the hate speech? I think that's what he was saying. Can we look after each other? And that was the mood of the room at the time, is that we need to, can we just be nicer people? Can we just look after each other a bit more? That's sort of how I've seen it so far.
Brilliant.
I'm sorry. I do go on, but
no, not at all. I know you've been very clear. Thank you.
I do need to tell you this story from the British LGBTQ Awards. So I decided that I would buy a table.
I didn't get an invite.
No, I'm sorry, didn't. But one of the things I thought about was you not really wanting to come up to London.
No, I don't. I don't really like awards ceremonies anyway.
And
but
I'm sorry I didn't. What I mainly did was invite friends who knew me from my clubbing days and were still with me, and then two major work colleagues who'd helped me on the two projects that helped me win this thing. But so anyway, I'm on a table, and then they call out my name, and out of sequence for a completely different award. And I'm like, I'm not sure what's going on. My whole table, get up, go and get the award. And so I get up and I'm walking down the side, and it was clear that there had some sort of typo had happened, and they'd called out randomly, and I hadn't actually won. So then I had to like style it out and walk halfway down, and then just sort of lean against the wall and get my phone out, because clearly there was a social media moment that I was needing to interact with. And then I had to sort of slither my way back to the table. So didn't make it to the stage to be embarrassed, but there were about 1,000 people who saw me. So not ideal. Apparently my name wasn't supposed to be called out. I wasn't supposed to get a prize.
I have I know this is we're talking about LGBT history, past and present. But my favorite award story is I don't go to award ceremonies, but when I met Emma, we did go to one, and we got hopelessly drunk in Liverpool Cathedral. That's where the award was. We were super drunk in the cathedral, and then Emma's name was called because she won, and she looked at me and said, "I don't think my legs work." But anyway, she managed to straggle out and did the funniest speech because she was very, very drunk. But she did, won an award. It was great.
Well, good for her for doing, even in that state, doing her due diligence to check that she was actually supposed to go on stage. Yes. I blame my friends who I think they'd had too much to drink, and they were like getting me up on that stage, whatever happened. Anyway.
Hilarious. Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Hey, we got another super chat. Yay. Thanks very much to George. Easy for you to say. Gateway minority targeting. We're all next. Following up on the whole, first they came for the trans people.
Exactly.
And it's very much the way that it looks like it's going. So thank you very much, George, for that. Yeah. And I'll let you two get back to the chat.
Yeah, and it's not the biggest jump from trans to everybody else.
No, it isn't. It's just stuck on trans. It's why I always try to, get LGBT people to come and fight on the trans, because the war is the front is trans rights and women, and because trans people feel like they're fighting with with some allies, and while we're trying to defend women's rights, but women are throwing muck at us while we're trying to defend something we
Yeah.
ultimately know. Trans people know that women are some of these organizations in America are in London and they are financed, and they are, they're having to put, boundaries outside abortion clinics. There are people in parliament standing up going, hey, I'm just asking questions, which is what they said to us in 2016 when they started to
Yes.
question trans people's existence. And so we know it would just be nice if all the women stood up and the LGBT community, we'd have this defeated in no time, because governments follow the Twitter twins and they go, oh, this is popular, we should be supporting trans people. But it at the moment, they're not, everyone's hedging their bets. Nothing's really moving forward. Nothing's really moving, it's a very slow, they've taken the trans healthcare away for children. Now they're going to review trans healthcare for adults. The next thing is, let's look at IVF and adoption for same-sex couples. Should we be doing that? It's a lot of money, blah, blah. And they'll move on. You can feel it in the wind that was way that was going to go. And those organizations are in London still trying to promote that. It's just that the Labour government have got their ears close to that kind of stuff at the moment, though they have accepted the cash report without even, even though it's been heavily criticized. So it is that if more allies and more of those celebrity gay guys stood up, and I'm not going to name them on here because I don't want to be in a newspaper, but there are some ones that we know that are very famous that just won't speak on it. But if they did, wow.
Yeah, it begins to move. And I hope, I'm ever an optimist, so I hope that will happen. And I'm also, more optimistic.
Yes.
Generally around the world, sort of.
Yeah.
I'll tell you more on November the 5th.
Yes.
I sort of hope that this will win out. And look, I think the interesting thing, I keep coming back to it. If someone's being marginalized, talk to one of those people and find out what their perception is. And by all means, if you don't believe them, don't believe them. And if your reality is different, then so be it. But at least talk to them. At least it's very easy to hate someone you don't know. It's much more difficult to do that.
Absolutely.
You do. And then also don't ask them to do all the fighting. Now, look, I'm not on enough picket lines. I do not do enough at all.
Do loads, Patrick.
No, I really don't. But I have, I've got to manage the various things that I do, but I don't. I just, I think we have to do some of the fighting. And look, if I go back to HIV and AIDS, the lesbian community were right there, right at the start. There were heterosexual people that were in there right at the start. I remember thinking, why are you here? Why are you? And they're like, because we're decent human beings, man, and you need help, so we help. And there are more good people than there are bad people. But I also think there are more people who are very busy and rushed and don't have time to do the due diligence. And they then project as less helpful people. I think if they could just slow down a bit, have a look, read around a bit, it's not many miles from not knowing anything to knowing enough to going, okay, that's wrong, we need to help.
And don't get me wrong, there are groups like L with the T and a lot of the lesbian groups and bisexual London bisexual group that I work with sometimes. There are some great groups out there working to support trans people because they know who's coming next. So there are organizations out there. It's just need some more those big celebrity head role models to step up.
But we also have people like Polly Shute and Rule Drager, people like Justin Farrance who are saying the right thing. And I think that in my world, in the legal world, and I think that we've got Oscar, the barrister, non-binary barrister, who's out there and being fabulous. And it is changing, not fast enough for any of us, and certainly not fast enough.
It just feels we need to rise up. So just a few quick questions as we move. Who are your heroes and who are? Oh, fab.
We've actually got another super chat. This is coming from Puninator. Thank you very much for the £5 super chat, mate. I do find it weird the biggest LGBT plus celeb supporter at the moment is a cis, straight, white male, David Tennant. But any support is welcome with open arms, in my humble or honest opinion.
Don't mess with the Time Lord.
Agreed. Don't mess with Doctor Who. That would be no.
So who are your heroes and villains, Patrick? Who are your heroes and villains?
So in life, the person I most admire is Jimmy Somerville because of what he did in the 80s, being, out, supporting others, incredibly proud in a time when he didn't need to be, very open about being sexually active and really big in the right at the beginning of the HIV, AIDS, and outrage, startups.
Yeah.
So him. I am a fan of. I'm not a fan of Doctor Who, but I am a fan of the guy that played Doctor Who, David Tennant. I think he is pretty cool. I like. I know Owen Jones is not everybody's cup of tea, but he is out there and he is saying the right things. There are some people in the sort of legal and LGBT community that I see on LinkedIn. So I call up my colleague Arek, who is an out gay man in our Warsaw office. That's not necessarily the easiest thing.
Yeah.
Magda Steger as well, who is an out trans woman who, has done Poland, now Germany, and now Spain. So she's out there she's been gloriously happy and positive. So I like that. I am a fan of some members of the incoming government. So there are some cool people around that. I thought it was pretty cool that Ricky Wilson of the Kaiser Chiefs on, I think it was Michael McIntyre saying, the big Saturday show was wearing a trans rights t-shirt. I was like, wow, that's punchy. Good on you, because that would have been a much easier choice for him not to do that.
Yeah.
So anybody that stands up and does the right thing. Billie Eilish over in America, Taylor Swift, what she's doing around just generally being a decent person and women and supporting people. Those are some of them.
And the villains?
Well, as I say, I need to just be careful around talking about
yes.
So I'll leave that bit there, but I'm not really a fan of books about wizards or people.
Yeah, I get you.
I'm not a big fan of anybody that's not nice to other people.
Yeah.
I don't really like people shouting at people, and I have a real dislike of people that punch down. That really, and there are enough people that do come through my social media feed that do that I don't really like. So most of them get blocked really quickly, right? Because I want the thing that go into my mind to be mainly put happy thoughts. So those are some of my. I don't know if that's enough.
No, that's good. Good heroes and villains. Sad to see that I wasn't on there, but that's fine. Okay.
Well, sorry, you are the hero. Let's go back to hang on LinkedIn yesterday. You were asked who were good voices in the LGBT community on LinkedIn, and you mentioned I think everybody on LinkedIn.
That's not true. I gave 3 names. It was one of those things I answered really quickly, and I went, "Oh, just blah blah blah," and then moved on. I went back and wrote Patrick McCann legend hashtag. I went back.
So I will shout out Emma and you. More Emma than you, obviously, right?
Yeah, Emma, of course. She
But
rocks.
I think what you're doing in the corporate space, particularly, because you're relentless, right? You keep saying it, and look, I have been on a number of your educative sessions, and they are second to none. They are brilliant. They are amusing, humorous. They cover a load of ground. They're really fast, but you can go with it. You come out feeling intellectually equipped, but also emotionally invested to do something, and I think that is terrific. Bobby Pickard, I think, is pretty cool in Transit the City. I will also call out LGBT Switchboard and their
they're amazing.
They're fabulous. Stephanie, who who has the best. She has the bluest eyes I've ever seen. But how she is transforming that organization.
Absolutely. So I got 2 questions left before we close. It's gone very quickly. Always does on this hour. So you have a magic wand, not from the wizardry book magic wand. It's a good wand from a different author's universe, and you can change one thing in the world. You're going to get one wish. What would you do with that one wish?
I think what I would like, God, this is going to sound really sinister, but I would quite like to insert a chip into everybody that makes them kinder. I can do it with a wand, can't I? I don't have to chip. I just want to do it once. And I just want people to be kinder. And I think that's about slowing down a little, talking to people, asking what they want, thinking how what you do might impact them, helping people a bit more, becoming a bit less self-obsessed. I mean, it's a really trite answer, but if I could just make people kinder,
Yeah.
it used to be, by the way, previously it used to be, I wanted to make before I met my husband, I wanted a one that I could make people fall in love with me and out of love with me. That was important as well.
Yeah.
So I've moved on a little bit.
Yeah.
I've moved on a little bit from that, but I think it would be around the kindness thing. And then if it's not that, there is a huge amount of money held by a small amount of primarily men,
Yeah.
and governments and organizations and corporates. And I just think that's very interesting when the distribution of wealth seems to be worthy of exploration, should we say?
Yes.
That's probably something I'd like to adjust a little bit.
Perfect. You got all those conspiracy theories worried about silicon chips being in people's heads now.
No, I'm so sorry, but yeah.
Perfect.
We've just had another super chat. Thank you very much to Darian Destar for the £10 super chat. That's really kind of you. Ironically, one of the greatest obstacles to LGBT plus equality is an openly gay man wears streeting. Smug, bumptious? Is that a real word? I don't know. Smug, bumptious soul that he is.
Yeah, he's not trans community and not happy clappy about our ways at the moment. Let's hope he improves. So, Patrick, last question. We call this pudding. We nick it off the Troll podcast. I don't know if you listen to Gemma and Marina. God. So, see, you can see how I'm approaching 60. Marina and Gemma, they call it pudding and I really like the term. So give us one thing to leave on that, for the LGBT community, but the trans community, what's one piece of good news, hope, leave us with some hopium at the end.
Oh, I like hopium. So look, I think it's going to get better. I think it will if we work with each other. I'm really encouraged by the newer generations who are coming through, who are ethical, caring, loving, invested in making sure that the environment that we live in is a good one, who are up for challenging dominance, who are intelligent, who are seem much, at least the ones I meet, are much less judgmental and are talented. And I do this work with these solicitor apprentices, and I'm getting these 18-year-olds coming into the industry who are they're just awe-inspiring, right? They work hard, they have aims, they want to do things in an ethical way, they want to not burn themselves out at the age of 30. They care about each other, and they're hashtag no judgments. And I'm really hopeful that by the time I'm dead, the world will be better. But I'm also hopeful that us as a queer community, I mean, like we build cathedrals, we create fashion lines, we introduce new foods, we bring peace deals to places, we invent things, we write the most amazing books, we have the most amazing plays, we're the best actors in the world, we are the best musicians in the world. We can do whatever we want, right? We have that power, and we just need to turn our attention to goodness, and I think we sort of will. Is where I am on it. So that is my hopium. There are some amazing people out there, a lot of them in the LGBTQIA plus community, and we are powerful. We get stuff done.
Wonderful. Wise words as ever. Thank you so much for
Pleasure.
coming onto the intersection, Patrick. It's been a real pleasure, generally for me, hopefully for our socialites in the chat and those watching the program. So I will be back next week on another program. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the intersection on Politics Social. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you all. Thank you again, Patrick, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for asking me.
Very welcome.